Hey there, Jeff Saris from Paleo Porn here. Today we're doing things a little bit differently. As you can see, I'm in front of the camera instead of behind it, which is kind of weird for me, but I think this will work out just fine. So this past week we were invited by our good friends over at Health by Habits to do a Paleo 101 talk. Really just a bare bones intro. We didn't get into the science or anything, but just an intro to paleo so you can jump in and hit the ground running. We had a really nice turnout and had a great time, but we filmed the whole thing. So today I wanted to share that video with you. Not only did Marla and I speak, but our friend Farmer Trogg, who is a local farmer, and our friend Spencer Harstead, who's a Functional Diagnostic Nutritionist. So I think you're gonna get a lot out of this if you're new to the paleo lifestyle, and I really hope you enjoy it. But before we jump into the video, I just wanted to let you know that this video is brought to you in part by Bluehost, and Bluehost is a spectacular hosting company. We've built hundreds of sites for our clients in our web design business, and we've used Bluehost a countless number of times. But if you go to paleoporn.net/Bluehost, right now they're offering the absolute lowest price that they've ever offered in the history of the company, as far as I know. But it's a great company to work with. We've made some really good friends over there since we've been working with them for so many years. But if you're looking to start a food blog like Paleo Porn, or if you want to start just a business, or if you need a website just as a portfolio or just a place to chat, head on over to paleoporn.net/Bluehost, and I guarantee you won't be sorry. But before we jump into the video, I just wanted to say one more thing. The audio at the very beginning is a little rough because we only had enough mics for Marla, myself, and Spencer and Trogg to share. So at the beginning, just bear with it for a couple minutes. The audio will clean up once Marla and I jump in there. But that's it. Without further ado, here is our Paleo 101 talk.
Referencing some paleo meals that they have. So they do have like a meal plan menu up there. And it's literally like there's a whole section that says paleo meal plan. So I did want to point that out for those of you that are interested. So again, thank you, Bountiful Eatery, for hosting us. This is wonderful. A little bit about Health by Habits, because I do see a lot of new faces apart from our previous workshops. So Health by Habits became a vision of just kind of spreading health awareness throughout Chicago. Ultimately, we want to go national, but starting with Chicago, because Chicago is on the top list of top 25 unhealthiest cities in the U.S. And we're a stand for changing that and transforming Chicago from that into one of the healthiest cities in the U.S. So that's our mission. We have a lot of work to do, and everything that we've experienced with our monthly workshops from 2014, definitely receiving feedback, definitely talking with our board of directors, and 2015 is going to be completely different, expanding to different venues all over Chicago. And we have incredible speakers and paleo experts tonight, so I'm really excited for that. And that includes Marla Saris, who is a famous paleo blogger. They own paleoporn.net, and she's also the author of several paleo cookbooks, which she will talk about in more detail. Her husband, Jeff Saris, is a Primal Blueprint certified expert. Spencer Harstead is a Functional Diagnostic Nutritionist, and he's also vice chair of Health by Habits Board of Directors. And we also have Farmer Trogg, who runs a CSA and will tell you all about that and his farming practices, which is awesome. So definitely want to welcome you. This workshop was put together, Paleo 101, because of popular demand. Everyone was asking us paleo questions. And although many of the members of the Health by Habits team happen to be paleo, we don't necessarily just promote paleo, we just promote health in general. So we accept all sorts of healthy diets and people that are not just paleo. So I did want to emphasize that. And this is our first Paleo 101 workshop, so welcome.
All right, so just to kind of get a feel for everyone, who here is kind of a paleo veteran? You've kind of done this for a while, you know your way around? Okay, cool. And now who's maybe new, completely brand new, maybe you just started, you've been working on it for a little bit.
I'm a virgin.
Alrighty. And now who's here for dinner and doesn't know why they're here at all? Okay, that looks fine. Okay, so I'm Jeff Saris, this is Marla, and we run a site called Paleo Porn, where we do food porn, not porn.
We don't do food porn.
Well, Marla cooks all the recipes, and then I shoot all the photos, and actually Dave, the guy behind the camera there, is our designer from our other business that we run, a branding agency. So yeah.
So let me just start by talking a little bit about our beginning, so where we started. In 2009 is basically when we started Paleo, but I want to talk a little bit before that. So we've always been health conscious people. We worked out daily through college, and we would always follow what would be considered a healthy diet, you know, like...
Yeah, typical kind of low fat and whole grain, like heart healthy whole grains, and kind of all the typical stuff that you would expect.
So that, I mean, we've always been health conscious, following what the new trends are, and so, I mean, I read the abs diet when that first came out and things like that. But in 2009, Jeff was reading Mark's Daily Apple, and he read The Primal Blueprint when it was first published, which is a fabulous book that we still recommend for new people to read.
And he's working on a second edition, I think, this year, which will be all new and kind of everything up to date, but it's a great starting point when you're interested in paleo primal, just sort of the general gist of everything. The beauty of it is that it's all science-based. It's not just, there's not the dogma there in this book. It's more just sort of telling you the facts and what we've learned recently.
Yeah, so when we started, we found Primal Blueprint, we read that, and everything just clicked for us. It was all making sense, so we started to make little changes. We didn't just jump in with all, both feet and clean out everything from the closets and the cabinets. We made small changes and small increments over a long period of time at first. But we did keep dairy in our diet to begin with. That was Mark's Primal. You'll hear Primal and you'll hear Paleo. They're the same thing. It's just Mark Sisson's version of the paleo diet.
Yeah, they sort of live side by side. So if you're keeping dairy, you're more primal. But when you do it for a while, you kind of just sort of say, well, we're just all paleo.
Yeah. So initially, we did get some great positive results. I lost 60 pounds. Jeff lost 30 pounds over the course of introducing and working our way through the paleo diet. But that's not the only benefit that comes along with changing your diet habits. I'd say...
Yeah, kind of, when we started also, to kind of go back, it was 2009. It was still kind of early in terms of the movement somewhat, and it was very different than it is now. The landscape was completely different. So today, I mean, we have a really good turnout here, which is awesome. And in 2009, we knew nobody in the Chicagoland area that even knew what paleo was. We were their connection with paleo. But we run an online branding agency called Spire, and everything we do is via the internet. So kind of our community, our paleo community we had a thriving community, but no one local.
Yeah, it was worldwide, friends worldwide who knew of it and were starting to embrace it. But there was no one local that we could go to. And so this is amazing now that there's so many people who are, one, interested, and two, that know about it and want to learn more. But back in 2009, we took a trip to, in 2010, we took a trip to Italy, and we were in Europe for a little, vacation. And
it was just interesting when we're in Pisa. So here we didn't have people who knew about it. There it seemed even more removed. So I don't wear these all the time. I wore them to show you, but these are 5 fingers. They're kind of the toe shoes, So I'm wearing a pair of shoes like these in Italy, and just walking down the street, minding our own business, and there's a gentleman on the sidewalk kind of nearby, maybe mid-40s or so, hunched over, pointing and laughing at my shoes. And I was like, this isn't quite the kind of introduction I wanted to the town, but okay. But it was sort of just sort of a good example of the time. I mean, things have come so far that, so many people know about it now, which is great. We love it.
Yeah, and locally we have the Paleo Chicago Meetup Group. If you're not already a member, if you want to go to paleochicago.com, that's an easy way to learn more about that. But that is a large group of people in the Chicagoland area and the suburbs who are actually following paleo or at least interested in it and want to keep up with it. So we're part of the meetup group. Occasionally we'll do movie nights at our house, and yeah, there's a lot of different things that are going on, and you might have learned about this event through the Paleo Chicago meetup group itself.
Actually, who is a member of Paleo Chicago? Awesome. Yeah, but definitely check it out. I mean, we're probably just around 800 people now. It's absolutely free. It's just a meetup.com group, and yeah, you can hang out. I mean, a lot of people, you'll kind of see a nice core group. So, I mean, you'll see us, you'll see Lynette, Spencer, you'll see Henry, and there's a nice group of people that you'll kind of get to know and hang out with. And then we have a lot of outliers that come out to different events, like maybe like this one might be some of your first one. And
But it's just really good to surround yourself, especially with something that's brand new, a change that your family and friends aren't familiar with. It's a good way to reach out and have someone there to help you keep you accountable.
Yeah, so recently, I mean, obviously we're married, so we live in the same place. I'm in the other room. Marla's like calling to me. She's like, come here, I gotta tell you something. Do you know what we are? I'm like, what are we? And so what are we?
We're skeptics.
Yeah, so skeptics in the kind of adolescent, constantly asking why sense. And that's something that we sort of hope to impart on you guys, is the importance of just asking why for all facets of your life. And in terms of food, that's why we came to paleo. The reason we run our own business is we kind of started questioning probably 5 years before paleo. We started questioning go to school, go to college, get a job, get married, get a picket fence, retire, and then have fun. We started to question, is that maybe not exactly what we have to do? Like, why do we have to kind of just believe that certain things are fact? And that's sort of why it was, I guess, inevitable that we'd come to paleo. Just as we're questioning more and more, we start to look at all of these different aspects of our life, which is, it's just having that just childlike and inquisitive nature is super valuable. But yeah, oh yeah, with my hand. So, and that's part of, recently, if you didn't notice, I broke my hand about less than a month ago. But just having that inquisitive nature, it helps in so many different facets of your life. So I broke my 5th metacarpal. I fought the floor and the floor won. So it was just me being stupid, and I busted the bone at a 50-degree angle. So at 50 degrees, it required surgery. I had to get pins. But something that we'll touch on a little bit, but something really just important and something that paleo helps to promote is good gut health. And gut health is super important. There's more bacteria in our gut than there are cells in our body. So it's super important to maintain that for, mood, cognition, like everything. It's just sort of a key component of paleo. Well, getting pins put into my hand, I had to get antibiotics. But I was the most difficult patient,
Luckily, we got a really great doctor who was super okay with him asking a ton of questions.
Yeah, but going through that, I was able to kind of find out, okay, here's all of the options. This is what we have to do. This is what is sort of on the edge. We can kind of go this way. And I found out exactly what the antibiotics were that I was going to take. But just sort of knowing that I needed to do this, I was able to then, now I'm focusing on probiotics, prebiotics, and trying to repopulate my gut. But it's just one other reason, just sort of keep that sort of inquisitive nature. We don't need to just accept a lot of the things that we might be just flat out told.
But you still use an antibiotic?
I only needed 1 dose, which I was trying to figure out exactly what I needed. So it was a small dose right before the surgery, just through the IV. And it was nothing afterwards, and there's no infection, nothing, but the kind of, if I wasn't to take antibiotics and get an infection, it could be as bad as me losing my hand, which would not be what I would want. But also, there's Matt Griffin is a doctor in Chicago and a physician who is familiar with paleo. You'd consider him a paleo doctor. And he was someone I was able to reach out to and just be like, I just want to talk to somebody who knows, just like this community, somebody who's on the same page with all of this. And he was like, honestly, I prescribe antibiotics every day in my practice. Sometimes it's just necessary, and this is necessary, which that was just sort of the
calming.
Yeah, the rounding the edges, just sort of making me feel a little better about the whole situation.
So that's a lot of intro for us. So I want to talk a little bit about, well, what is paleo, right? So first thing I want to just tell you is somewhat of a book definition. Paleo is a nutrient-dense, real food approach to eating with a focus on reducing or avoiding toxins. So you might be thinking, okay, well, what are toxins?
Yeah, it's pretty much anything that would cause inflammation in your body or just give you adverse effects. Like gluten is one. It can be a sliding scale. Sometimes, like someone might be celiac and clinically diagnosed as gluten intolerant. But generally speaking, we all have some level of gluten intolerance. And we also remove seed oils. Seed and vegetable oils can oxidize at temperature. That can cause inflammation in the body. It's really just sort of focusing, like going back to just real food is what we're doing. But through paleo, we're trying to optimize our performance. We want to avoid that 2 p.m. crash. We want to feel good. We want to figure out what it means to actually feel good again, which a lot of us kind of lose that. And sort of through the diet, we always kind of hesitate to call it paleo diet because a diet has pretty bad connotations. I mean, it's just you get on a diet, you cut your calories, count your calories. I avoid this for a month. I do this for whatever.
I get off a diet.
Yeah, but basically what paleo is, it sounds super pretentious to constantly correct people, but it's a lifestyle. So it's our diet. It's the diet that we kind of stick to on a day in, day out basis. It's not a short-term thing. It's really, we've pulled out things that we would consider like not food and replace them with real food.
Yeah, so before we get any further into what paleo is all about, if you were simply to do one thing right now, I would recommend you to start a food journal. Just to write down what you're eating and drinking on a daily basis, just so that you can see what you've got and what you're actually doing right now. And then once you, the reason I say this is because a year ago, around this time, we were in Denver and I got a text that my mom was having trouble and they brought her into the hospital and they didn't know what was wrong. So when we got home from Denver, I went over to their house and I was like, okay, now spill it. Like, what's going on? What's the problem? Like, how can we fix whatever's going on? And so we decided with her to do just that. We started her on just a little tiny book that she would carry with her, a spiral notebook and a pen, and she wrote down daily what she was drinking and eating. She didn't make any changes whatsoever. And then every week, I would go over to her house and I would go over her journal with her and I would tell her, she was also recording how she was feeling and what her emotions were like on that day as well. So when I would go over the food journal with her, we would discuss, okay, yesterday you had sugar for breakfast and around noon you were crashing, you weren't feeling good.
And not being a spoonful of sugar, but sugar in any of its forms, maybe orange juice, maybe cereal, maybe whatever it was.
Yeah, and so I would continually go through her food journal and point out things on her regular daily basis of what she was eating and what she's been continuing to eat and not changing anything, about things that she could maybe make changes for. And then she gradually started to make changes. So she had eggs for breakfast instead of having orange juice and cereal. And we would track the difference, track what she was eating, track how she was feeling. And before she knew it, she was eating much better foods. She lost weight in the process, and she was feeling much better. So there was and then people started asking her, oh, what are you doing? You know, you get that question when you start seeing results and other people start seeing results. So it was, it's all comes back to, for me, telling you just track, just write down and keep patterns and look for patterns of what's going on.
And granted, we don't necessarily track everything we're eating now. I mean, we've been doing this for a while. We know, we've removed all of the things that we'll mention in a moment, and we know kind of how we respond to different dietary choices. But that story is really a good example of just how the people closest to you are going to be the last pretty much to listen to what you have to say. So, I mean, we've been doing this now, we're going on 6 years, and none of our families are actually paleo. They listen, they're open to it, but at the same time, when people kind of come to that realization on their own, it is so much more valuable than trying to change someone. So just leading by example is super valuable. But before we kind of get in, we have our definition we call the Paleo 2-step. Before we kind of tell you exactly what that is, The general consensus typically has been just sort of the calories in, calories out. So that's what we've sort of accepted for several decades. Just if you take in more than you burn, then that can be a problem. But the problem is over the last 30 or so years, like obesity is just through the roof. We have obese toddlers. I mean, just the thought that a toddler would reduce his or her intake of food and exercise more is just preposterous. Like, it's just, there's something else at play. And in 1980, type 2 diabetes was called adult onset diabetes. And at that point, there were 0 cases of adolescents with type 2 diabetes. In 2012, the adult onset moniker went away. I mean, we were up to 57,000 adolescents with type 2 diabetes. So something's off. I mean, it's been the 30 years essentially, 30 plus of doing low calorie, kind of no fat, and all of these changes, yet all of the markers that would kind of be showing that these changes were valid and good are going in the opposite direction. So just to rewind a bit further. In the 1930s, there's a dentist, his name was Weston A. Price, and he was interested in connecting sort of dental hygiene with food, overall vitality and health, and just trying to figure out the connection. What he ended up doing is going to tribal peoples and people who are native and really isolated. So they haven't been exposed kind of to the Western world, to the modern conveniences that even in the 30s there were. And what he was finding is entire tribes of people with perfectly straight, perfectly white teeth in essentially perfect health. And so he starts digging into the diet and being like, okay, what is it that is consistent across these? And one would be predominantly dairy, one would be predominantly seafood, another would be predominantly game meat from hunting and tubers. So despite being very sort of seemingly diverse, what they had in common was nutrient density. And nutrient density is essentially what's like at the core of paleo, is we want foods that are highly nutritious, that's sort of why we're bringing saturated fat back. We are getting rid of grains and gluten. The nutrition is in, say, the liver, or even the muscle meat and the fat and everything there, more so than our cereals and our fortified products that we've created. Move forward a little bit. 2001, Loren Cordain coined the term paleo. He wrote the book, The Paleo Diet. He's a professor at the University of Colorado. He started to connect all of hundreds of research papers, sort of connecting these pieces, these threads that go through everything, and realizing that most of what the science was saying today, when he was reading it, was correlating with our kind of ancient ancestors, like the Paleolithic era and things like that, what a caveman would have eaten, a hunter-gatherer. And he started to put these pieces together. It took a while before like the moniker really caught on, and arguably Mark Sisson, who wrote the Primal Blueprint, had a large impact on that, along with a couple other people, really bringing it to the forefront. But essentially, it's a great name, and we still love it. Some people kind of get rid of it and say like wellness and health, just healthy eating and whatnot. But the only problem with it is kind of the inherent connotations of what a caveman is. So a caveman's going around and clubbing animals and dragging his women around the house. But most kind of importantly, or kind of the most pervasive part, is the whole cavemen only lived 30 to 36 years. And that's sort of the general consensus is, I mean, a few decades, that was an entire lifespan. The problem is it's skewed. It's not just cut and dry like that. In sort of those times, like caveman times, infant mortality rates were extremely high, just through the roof, because childbirth is a big undertaking. It's no simple thing. There's a lot happening and a lot that can go wrong. If we look at the same kind of data, so the 30, 36 years old, but look at children or people who live past adolescence, suddenly that lifespan goes out to 72 years. 72 years in kind of the Paleolithic, like caveman era, versus today, and when we're at 78 years on an average, with modern medicine and everything that entails. it's not it's not as much of a disconnect as sometimes the name can let on, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, like, we have this name that we all come together because you see the name and you're like, oh, I know, or I'm familiar and want to know about paleo, I'm going to go out to this. So yeah.
So for our definition of paleo, how we define it, like Jeff mentioned, is with the paleo 2-step. So the first step is to eat plants, animals, nuts, and seeds, and in that order. And that's the diet portion of the paleo diet. That's our definition. So what does that look like? If you were to walk into the grocery store, there's around 44,000 different products that you may find there. Majority of those things, not really paleo. The whole majority of the inner aisles of the grocery store, anything that has a package on it, is pretty much not a paleo product. I would recommend you stick to the outer edges of the grocery store, right? You walk in, you go to produce, you got your vegetables, your fresh fruits, and if you keep going, you've got your meat counter, you've got your fishmonger, you've got all of your protein there. And then if you keep going, you've got your refrigerated section, you've got your dairy, you've got your eggs, and then a few things on the inside aisles, such as olive oil or things of those sorts we can find, but majority of everything that we eat lies in the exterior aisles of the grocery store.
Yeah, so we say that it's plants, animals, nuts, and seeds sort of in that order because it kind of tells a bit more than it would just let on. I mean, a good, like a proper paleo meal, you're going to be overflowing with vegetables, overflowing with plants. And so that's the first goal on your plants, animals, nuts, and seeds. And then you have your serving of meat. Then you have maybe nuts and seeds as a garnish. It's optional. It depends on how you tolerate them. But in the most simple sense, that is what a paleo diet is. It might be a great salad with onions and garlic and carrots, or just a really nice salad, maybe a baked sweet potato and a little steak, or ideally liver. This is something that we've lost over the years, is the nutrient density. What we sort of prize is muscle meat, steaks, ribeye steaks, filet, all of these things that we pay way too much money for to get. And essentially that, in the kind of 100 years ago, in the more like tribal kind of times, that's what a hunter-gatherer would have been feeding to their pets. It seems far-fetched, but passed down generation after generation, they knew that the core, like, nutrient-dense foods are the organ meats. I mean, with liver as king, and then sort of everything else along those lines. And you can even think just a couple generations back. I mean, maybe your grandmother or maybe your great-grandmother kind of sitting someone down, like their child, at the table and being like, you can't leave this table till you eat your liver. It's something that's just sort of, it's been ingrained over centuries. We've known that these nutrient-dense foods are super valuable, yet we've somehow become disconnected from it today.
And a huge misconception of paleo is that it's a meat-based diet. It's not a meat-based diet. It's a plant-based diet.
Yeah, it's a plant-based, not plant-only. It's predominantly what we're eating in kind of space on the plate are plants. In terms of nutrient density and calories and everything, the meat is the bulk of that. But really, if you have a plate full of meat and that's sort of your day in, day out, you're missing all the benefits of really moving over to paleo.
Yeah, so that's step one of the paleo 2-step. Step two is, oh, question? Yeah? Yeah.
Is paleo more of a component to your nuts and seeds being raw versus roasted?
I go with everything raw, for sure. I know a lot of people will sprout their nuts. I've never really gotten into doing that. Correct, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and if they're soaked, I mean, if you're going raw, soaking and kind of, yeah, is always a good idea. But yeah.
Yeah, so our paleo 2-step, right? It's the eat plants, animals, nuts, and seeds, and then move frequently and lift heavy things. So what does that look like? Well, everybody stand up. We sit way too much during the day, right? I mean, we sit through work all day long. We sit in the car to drive home. We sit in the car to drive to work. We just need to move around and be a little bit more active, walking a little bit throughout the day. And the lifting heavy things kind of part of it, that can be basically just your body weight. So just doing a simple squat. So let's just do a couple of squats.
Yeah, if you have some space, I know it's kind of cramped.
So when you bend down, you don't want your knees to go beyond your toes, but you want to push your butt out. So let's just do a couple squats.
Yeah, just sort of stick your butt back, arms out.
Yeah, that's lifting heavy things because your body is a giant meat sack that's pretty heavy.
And I mean, it's moving our bodies through space is essentially what we're doing. We don't have to be going to the gym, lifting a bunch of heavy, like Olympic plates and all of these things. We really just want to be active again. I mean, we're sedentary people today. My hand shouldn't be in a keyboard position, sort of by default, but it is. It's just, there's this disconnect from ourselves and nature, and that's something we really want to reintroduce, kind of with the lifestyle aspect of paleo.
So you guys can take a seat. Thank you for a little demonstration there.
But yeah, even, I mean, picking up your children and just those little things that they totally fit into the lift heavy things aspect of it.
Yeah, so there are a ton of minute details when it comes to paleo. I mean, we can dig into simply just olive oil and talking about olive oils. But we wanted to give you the basics. This was a Paleo 101 talk. And the first thing that we actually do want to dig into tonight is conventional farming versus traditional farming. So sourcing, where does your food come from? So conventional farming, I'm sure everybody has seen the videos of CAFOs, which are concentrated animal feed operations. That's where, you know, those images you'll see of the chickens that are living on top of each other and the cows who aren't allowed to graze on the grass. And those are the things that we try and stay away from. We want to look at traditional farming in the sense that your great-grandparents, they had a little garden in their backyard. They might have had a couple of chickens that laid their eggs, and that's where they sourced them from. They might have had a dairy cow where they were able to get all of their milk and make their own cheese. We don't all have the time to do all that, but those farmers still exist. And it's really important to know who your farmer is. So we brought a farmer along today so that we could have him talk about his farm. And so here is Chris. Yeah, let's hear from him.
So we've all got these little phones now that we take our notes on. Isn't that great? Well, I'm Chris, or Trogg, Farmer Trogg. Our farm is Trogg's Hollow. We service the Chicagoland area and the Rockford area. Our farm is out in the country, so we're out by Rockford more than we're by Chicago because that's where land is. What do? We farm vegetables. We have a small farm, it's 10 acres. We're not a huge farm. We want to provide real food for our family and other people to help pay our bills. That's how it works. How do we do it? We use our hands and our animals and a couple people that work for us. We have a small tractor that isn't used for much more than cultivating or tilling the earth to get it ready to plant into. Yeah, that's what we do. We are mostly a vegetable farm. We do have animals, like I was saying, but they are for protection or pest control or for our own personal food. Yeah, that's Trogg's Hollow. We started years ago. When I was born, I was not farming, but I was in somebody's backyard, my great-grandmother's, in the city of Chicago, out there helping her eat tomatoes. And she didn't just have a small little garden. She was she bought land when O'Hare was first developed, and she was on, well, she had what's the equivalent of, I think, 6 city lots, where she had fruit trees and gardens and things like that. Now, her house is surrounded by other brick buildings, but that's where I started this all. Went through school, and my family always had about 1/4 of an acre planted. My wife and I, after we got married, moved to Scotland because, well, she went to get her master's. She has a degree in archaeology, Viking archaeology. So if you see our logo, yes, those are Viking runes. It means Trogg's Hollow. It kind of ties us together. Here, I'll show everybody. I didn't put it up, but this is us. So stare, you can't see it that well, but you can come up and look. The key is when we were there, Scotland, we were in Glasgow, and it's further north than Moscow is. It's very far north, but you have the lucky problem of being on the Gulf Stream. So it's not very cold all the time, but they don't grow anything there. Meaning that all of their vegetables in England and Scotland, at least 15 years ago, came from Spain or from Mexico or South Africa. And so that's when we first decided that we were going to start growing on a bigger scale instead of just our small gardens. Because our intent was to stay there, we invested in a greenhouse over there because you need a little bit warmer weather and more light. 4 hours a day of light is not very good, and it's like that quite a bit up there. Long story short, that didn't work. We had 4 kids. Work in the corporate world after a while just is no fun, and the gardens took over our lives. We lived in Elgin for 13, 14 years, and we started our farm in the middle of the city. We had a house 7 blocks off the river. If you're familiar with Elgin, it does have 100,000 people in it. It is the 7th biggest city in the state, I think, maybe 6th now. It's not small. There's a lot of people, and we were growing right in the middle of it. Eventually, we grew into rented acreage, and now we have a farm, like I said. We're in Poplar Grove, Illinois, which is just by Belvedere outside of Rockford. So that's how we got to this. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things they said. First of all, this whole squats thing, I'm sorry I didn't get up, but I've been working all day shoveling goat manure.
You have a pass.
So I'm not going to be doing that. I'm sorry if I smell too. I tried to wash it off. But that's the thing, is that that's what we do. We were out there with forks, moving the manure from where they lived all winter out into the field where our squash and our vegetables are going to go. We didn't have a tractor or didn't buy some whatever that bomb-making material is that all the other farmers use. We grabbed the filth from the goats and put it in the field, and then we'll spread it all out and plow it into the field. That's our nutrients. We do not have off-farm inputs except for a couple. One is we use organic cow manure compost for our seedling starts because I want them to not catch any diseases that might be in our field or grab any of those bug eggs that might be in our field. I don't want them to have to deal with it till they get there. So we start our plants in a local cow manure compost that is organic. The other off-farm input is seeds. We don't save all our own seeds. We get them all from organic companies, mostly in Vermont because that's where the biggest organic and non-GMO company is. But we also use Seed Savers, which is about trading seeds and all that, and we save our own. So those are our 2 off-farm inputs. We don't have anything else. That's our plan. We don't have any organic chemicals. We don't have any non-organic chemicals. We don't use any organic fertilizers or non-organic fertilizers. Everything comes from us or our plants or our animals. And this is a big deal. You talked about conventional versus traditional, or a lot of people would call that organic now. We're farming like I was raised, which is put the seeds in the ground and let it grow and pick off the bugs and pull the weeds. It's not easy, but like you guys said, it's a step beyond what organic certification is. I don't want to be organic certified because I have 4 kids and 100 shareholders that walk into my field and pick that fruit and want to eat it right there. And there are still things, whether they're organic or not, that are poisonous. I mean, one way to keep blight off your tomatoes is to spray it with copper. That's poison, or toxic, whatever the right word is. I don't know, I'm a farmer. But we do. We have people who come to the farm because our farm's completely open that walk right into the field and eat things. So that is, we feel, our responsibility to make sure that this is how we grow. So that's how we grow. Now, I don't need colors on there. You guys were talking about how paleo is meat and vegetables. I think this is great because, well, my sister is a vegan, which is great. I got no problem with that. But the key is that she is very much against our having animals on our farm. And the thing that I try to tell people very regularly is that if you're worried about the health of the animal or how many animals are dying, you should be eating meat and not be a vegan. Because the way that we collect soy on this planet kills more animals than we could ever kill by small farms raising these animals for you to eat on their own. Plus, they're taken better care of. That was just one note I found, so I'm sorry, I'll get off my box there. But you were talking about nutrient density. It's vegetables and meat. And this is the key, and I think why you guys had me come in here too, is that you get the best nutrient density, the most healthy food from your neighbor or from your backyard. So getting food, whether it's from Whole Foods or the Jewels or wherever it is nowhere near as good for you as going to your farmer's market and asking them, where is your food coming from? Are you growing it? It doesn't matter if they put chemicals on it. It doesn't matter if it's organic or not. What's important is how close to where you're eating it and how soon before you're eating it was it picked. This is the most important thing because all science shows, without an argument, that the sooner you eat it after being picked or being butchered, the more nutritious it is. That's all there is to it. Because as soon as it's picked, it's like sweet corn. You ever had, well, sweet corn nowadays is nothing like it used to be. But you were supposed to pick it off the plant and drop it into a hot pot of boiling water almost immediately because it was only sweet for that half an hour. Now, of course, you can get stuff that's sweet and they ship to South Africa. But the thing is that immediately those carbohydrates or those sugars start turning into carbohydrates and the other nutrients start falling apart once they do not have the food from its root system. And that's just how it is. So you need to, if you're really paying attention to nutrient density, you need to get food from as close of a source of growing as you can. That's where we come in. we meaning local farmers, there are a ton of us around here, whether you need nuts, or you need, I know it's paleo, but grains or vegetables or fruit or meat. There are tons of us around here and not enough to fill what people should be eating here, even if they're not on a paleo diet or a primal diet. You talked about how Chicagoland is whatever ranking in worst healthy cities in the country. I am a member of a group called the Band of Farmers CSA Coalition. And we started this coalition this year because if you compare Chicagoland to Madison, Wisconsin, we have the same number of local food eaters. The Chicagoland area has, what, 8 million people in it? Something like that if you include everything. Madison has a couple 100,000. How does that make sense? And that's the problem, is that it doesn't. Nobody around here, or the vast majority of people, either don't know that they can get local food or how important it is. A good argument is it costs a lot more too, and that's not true either. If you break it down, the same food that you're getting from your Whole Foods or your Jewels, which you can't get local food there usually, just going with organic is going to cost the same as getting a share from us or going to the farmer's market and buying it. And then people say, well, I don't even buy that stuff. Well, that's great. Just get your vegetables, like you said. That's what's important. But maybe we should restructure our priorities a little bit. Food is what keeps us alive and keeps us moving, and that should be, as a society, our top priority. Yeah?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You were saying about that it's best to eat it right away,
Yeah.
which makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
What if you're a farmer or you have your own garden,
Mhm.
organic garden? What about if you're freezing stuff?
Well, see, we all have to prepare for winter. We all have to can.
Lose it then?
You do lose some of your nutrition in there. But like I said also, is that eating vegetables is better than not eating vegetables. And that's the key. I mean, in the winter, I can't get tomatoes. I can, for 3 weeks straight, all the tomatoes I can from our farm, because I need tomatoes in the winter. There's stuff in there that even if it is degrading, is still better for you than getting the green tomatoes that are from the truck from Florida. And that's just a side note. That is how the tomatoes at the store come up in the winter. They're picked green and they're gassed to change colors. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing dangerous about that, but that's why they don't taste like anything. The other thing that I noted is that you talked about type 2 diabetes. And a lot of people say, oh, we're eating too much meat now. This is really the problem. And we're eating too much sugar. The fact is that we've had a decrease in meat consumption since the 50s. We don't eat as much meat. We don't at all. In fact, what has gone up is the grains. Like I said, I'm not saying what to eat or not. That's your thing. But The increase in what we've been eating more of is the grains, and there is a lot of empty calories there. So the key is, like you said, real food. And real food comes from the people growing it in the area. Here's another note. Illinois, 95% of the product that we eat in Illinois doesn't come from Illinois. That's a problem. So all of our money is going to someplace else, whether it's California, oh, they're in a drought and shouldn't be growing vegetables anyway, or South Africa, or Holland, or greenhouses in Canada. It's not staying in Illinois. Well, who's got a job problem? I think Illinois has a job problem. And we're not spending on things from Illinois, the things that are most important. Instead, we're buying it from someplace else. We do have in Illinois this thing that the state has said we want to have 20% of our food that we're consuming come from Illinois by 2020. It's hard. We live in a grain and a corn and soy state. But the fact is that this is important. It's not just about your health. It's about your local economy, which then leads back to your health. And it's so, you know, there's three things about local food. It's the best food that you can eat for nutrition. It's really not that expensive. It's not, I don't want to say it's the cheapest, because you can get some really cheap food, but I'm not sure you should be eating it. And what's that? Food, right. Well, and that's the key, is that I'll just use McDonald's as an example. I don't like to attack anybody, but so I go to McDonald's and get a meal, it's $6. But if I had made a sandwich at home, it was $1 at the most. If I bought it all. Of course, I don't buy it all, we make it all. But that's the thing, is that it is cheaper to get this stuff and make it yourself. Yeah.
Is it pretty possible or easy for you to sustain through the winter? Do you use greenhouses, or how do you?
We do use greenhouses. That we have a wind and a snow problem here, and a light problem. But we are able to get mostly through the winter on what we've saved. Our goal is not to be cut off from the world. Listen, I like my internet, okay? I like watching movies, I like electricity and all this. Our goal is to at least be sustainable as much as we can be. Yes, if I could get rid of gasoline in the trucks and the tractors, I would. It's not something that's feasible right now. If I could put solar panels on the house, well, we're gonna sooner or later, because that would get us more sustainable in that way. But yes, this year was rough. We didn't have a good tomato year last year, so we weren't able to keep tomatoes the whole winter, but we still have potatoes and onions and peaches and our grape juice and our apple cider and meat. Now, like I said, we do grow some animals or raise some animals, but most of them are not for meat. So we trade with other local farmers for meat. But yeah, we try our best. But again, we're practical too. There's certain things, you know, we got 4 kids. I gotta have some cereal in there somewhere. Something to fill them up. I don't care what is not in it. I like that you guys said that it's a lifestyle, not a diet, because that's the key here, is that you're gonna go on a diet and it's not gonna do anything. You need to, eating local or eating paleo is a whole lifestyle change. It's why we changed from me driving into the city every day and going to work and decided we're just gonna farm. Yeah, we're not going to make any money. Yeah, it's going to be hard, but it's such a difference. You know, we got 4 kids and dogs and animals, and they couldn't be happier out there, and neither could we. You know, it was years where I spent, oh, I hate driving to work, but now it's like, oh, it's 6, I got to get up and go shovel goat manure out. I don't care. It's great, because I get to go back in an hour and sit in a warm house maybe and see the kids and all that. And yeah, that's what's me, not what would happen if you guys were buying local food. But it is a lifestyle change, and that's the key. I can't read what I wrote here. I'm sorry. Oh, I said just eat real local food. That's what I said. Okay. Oh, that's what my note was. So you said the first thing you would say is take notes. I'm going to differ with you on this. It's really simple. Just eat real food. You don't got to take notes. Your body's going to know when you're full if you're eating greens as much as you should be. I mean, these are the facts. You can only shove so much lettuce or kale into your stomach before it's full. And so I understand the taking notes. That's great. It really helps, but it's really easy. Just go get local food. And again, more greens than not. I mean, that's how we pack our shares. Half of our shares are in green. So to talk about that. Am I cool with that? Yeah. Okay. I keep saying this word share. And the way that our farm makes money is that we sell what's called CSA shares, where people sign up to get boxes of local vegetables delivered either to them or to a local pickup area. And they don't have to worry about going to the farmer's market. They don't have to worry about, oh, I don't know if I'm going to have enough vegetables for the week, because they're getting a box every week. It's kind of new in the Midwest. You guys probably have heard of it a lot because you kind of the people that look into this stuff, it seems like. But that's how we do it. And there are a lot of us that do this. Not enough. There should be more. But there are a lot of us that do this. Our farm, Trogg's Hollow, I keep hitting this microphone, so I'm sorry if it keeps doing something there. We drop in Logan Square at the Logan Square's Farmers Market, which I think, if I remember living in Chicago, is right over there. Logan Square Farmers Market is also apparently the #2 farmers market in the country. I just found this out. It's right next to some place in San Diego. So I don't know where, I've never been there, but that's apparently the nationwide consensus. There's also, if you're not from the area or that's too far away from you, I have a whole list of people that could get you real food either straight to your door or a local pickup spot, because I am part of the, what do we call it? I don't know, steering committee for the Band of Farmers, which I talked about before, which is helping to get anybody who's interested hooked up with a local farmer, a CSA farmer in Chicagoland. So that's what we do. And well, first, you should definitely come up and talk with me or ask me questions and sign up, or at least get newsletter stuff from us, because anybody who's looking to start this definitely needs food forced on them every week. Real food. I mean, we have shareholders who, well, I tried this and I didn't know what to do the first year, but now it's just like it comes and we deal with what it is. And in general around here, you're getting a bunch of greens and then whatever else we can pick out of the field. And that's, I guess, the big thing, the greens. That's a really important thing. And by greens, I mean anything leafy, because it could be purple too. As long as it's leafy, we call it a green. The last thing I wanted to say is that if anybody's interested, the Band of Farmers, to show that farmers aren't all just playing in the dirt all the time, on Saturday night, we have a fun little thing to get to know your farmer differently, where we're all going to be performing at the Hideout. All sorts of farmers going to put on a performance at the Hideout Saturday night. So if you ever wanted to see farmers not farming, or talk to them in an area where, hey, maybe, you know, it won't all be about health and all this, because it won't be, because farmers like to have fun too, that would be a perfect opportunity to do it, because there will be a ton of us there, and the whole point is to show that we are normal people. And I know farmers, oh, that's the guys in the big tractors. No, most of us aren't. Most of us probably have some other career or some other job, or wanted to be musicians or something like that, but we found that this is what really helps us. So I think I'm done. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So you raised a lot of great points towards paleo. It's awesome. What Jeff and we met Farmer Trogg at a CSA Expo recently, and so we were looking to get into a vegetable CSA. We are currently. So we are working with another farmer who couldn't make it tonight, who was Farmer Wayne, but we are actually a drop-off for that CSA, and so that's going to be cool for the suburbs to have a point of contact. And then we personally have a meat CSA that we're a part of, which is a farm called Nature's Choice Farm. So that, again, she raises grass-fed beef and pasture-raised pork and pasture-raised chicken, and we get our eggs straight from the farm, which that was the selling point for me, because I was looking for local eggs rather than what was found at the grocery stores.
Yeah, and really, in terms of grass-fed, pasture-raised, it just means the animals are being raised how they would have been throughout history. So cattle out on the grass. I mean, they eat grass all day long.
I just want to add something to that. We have a lot of questions about this. Well, they're organic, or the eggs are free range. That doesn't mean what you think it means. Organic just means they're given organic feed. They're still in cages, or they're still on cement, living in their own filth. It just means they got certified because they're being fed organic food. Free range, when it comes to the birds, it means they're given a little space to walk out of their cages into. It does not mean they're given organic feed. It does not mean they're treated humanely at all, except they get to see the sky once in a while. Most likely their beaks are still cut off as well. What you do want to look for is this, what they're talking about, pasture-raised animals. These are the ones that are treated properly and the ones that have the omega-3 content because they're eating the bugs and the grass out in the field. Sorry.
No, that's perfect, and that's the reason to really get to know your farmer. I mean, you can talk directly to him or her and find out really how are you raising these animals.
So the next thing I just wanted to walk you through is if you were to go home tonight and make a paleo meal, what would that look like? Our goal tonight is really for you to go home and just cook your next meal. If you're cooking your next meal, then you're on your way to being much more healthier than any other alternatives to that. So what I want to walk you through cooking is...
And actually the beauty of it, if you just have that goal, just cook your next meal. I mean, if you fall off the wagon, if you don't eat quite the best stuff one time, if the goal is just to cook your next meal, you can always do that. So it's just looking forward, just always looking forward and sort of getting sort of that 1% better every day, you know?
So let's visually cook together. So this is what I like to do. So if we make meatloaf with a little bit of liver in it, so we're going to kind of hide those flavors, and some mashed cauliflower and some salad. That's what we're going to visually make together right now. So if we don't have access to a CSA and we don't have access to the meat and everything straight from our farmer, majority of you are right now going to walk through the grocery store. So we're going to visualize yourself walking into the entrance of your grocery store where you actually walk in. When you turn right, you're probably walking into the produce aisle. In the produce aisle, you're going to grab yourselves 2 onions, a bulb of garlic, a pound of carrots, a head of celery, and we're going to make that celery organic. And the reason why we're going to choose organic celery is because it's on the Dirty Dozen. How many of you have heard of the Dirty Dozen? Fabulous. So the Dirty Dozen, just for those who don't know, is a list put out by the EWG, the Environmental Working Group, and you can find them at ewg.org. Every year they put out a list of the 12 dirtiest items in terms of toxic chemicals that are used on conventional gardening with those things. And so those are the ones that you want to choose organic with if you're shopping at the grocery store. And then they also put out the Clean 15. And so those are the 15 most clean things that you don't really need to buy organically. So always on the Dirty Dozen, you'll find celery. And at the top of that list is apples, because they're sprayed and everything on the outside you're eating. So I would recommend you check out that list and see if you're not going to buy everything organic, which you don't really need to. I would highly recommend that you at least look at those 12 items and go, if you're at the grocery store, with those things. So back to our grocery shopping. We've got our onions, we've got our garlic, we've got our carrots, we've got our celery. We're going to pick up a head of cauliflower and put all that in your cart. And then we're going to grab an avocado. And when you're grabbing your avocado, you want to squeeze it, see if it's a little bit tender. If it's hard, put it down and look for another one. You can always pop off the top and see what the color is on the avocado. And if it's darker, then you know that it's ready, and you should pick that one up and put it in your cart. So we've grabbed our avocado, we've got our produce, and let's move to the meat department. So we are going to grab 2 pounds of grass-fed ground beef. We're going to ask them if they've got any beef or bison liver, and we're going to throw some of that in our cart. And then we're going to move to the dairy and the dairy aisle. So we're going to pick up a tub of, or not a tub, what would you call it?
Stick. A
stick of salted grass-fed butter. And we usually go with Kerrygold because that is made from grass-fed. It's grass-fed. It says it right on the label.
Grass-fed cattle. It's Irish, and she kind of slipped on the tub, but when we're talking butter, we are not talking margarine.
Yeah.
They are not the same thing in any way. Margarine, those are all the seed oils and things that we are avoiding to make it stable more like butter, but butter is where you want to be.
Yeah, so we want real butter. So if you're at the farmer's market and you see someone who's actually making their own butter, I'd say local is always best. So if you can get anything local, go with that. But right now we're walking through our grocery store and we're getting what we can. And so now we're going to check out, we're going to go home, we're going to preheat our oven, and we're going to throw in these ingredients. So in a bowl, we're going to chop up the onion, we're going to chop up the celery, the carrots, some garlic, throw that in there with the ground beef. We're going to mince up some of that liver. Now the amount of liver you throw in there is going to be the amount that you'll taste. So if you're a liver virgin, then you might want to start with just a little bit and throw that in, and then save the rest of it for some other meal. We're going to spice it up with some sea salt. You can add as many herbs as you want. I'd recommend oregano. Mash that together, throw it into a bread pan, throw it in the oven. When that's done, we can start on our cauliflower. So chop that up, throw it on the stovetop. You can simmer that and steam it. And once that's rolling, you can move on to your salad. So chop up all of your vegetables for your salad, throw it into a bowl. And if I'm assuming here that you have olive oil in your house, but if you don't, you might have wanted to pick that up from the store. I use olive oil and apple cider vinegar, and that is my dressing. And when you merge that with a chopped up avocado and some garlic and some onion, it makes its own flavor combinations, and that is truly my only dressing that I use. Although in my cookbook you'll find a few different of the creamy varieties like ranch and things like that, because I know, like my father likes ranch dressing. So there are people who don't like just using olive oil and apple cider vinegar, and that's for them. But
except saying just using it, I think we have kind of a incorrect expectation of what a salad is, because I mean, you go out to a restaurant, you grab a salad. Generally, I'm sure not here, but generally kind of at a normal sit-down place, the salads tend to be lame. You know, I mean, it's just you have your iceberg lettuce, maybe some shreds of carrot, and then your dressing. But really, salads can be so tasty. It's night and day when you're making one at home with real food versus just going to the little plate that they toss out to you.
So we're going to toss all those ingredients together in a bowl and get the dressing all together and plate it. So we've got our mashed cauliflower. Oh, when your steamed cauliflower is done, you want to use like a potato masher, or if you have a food processor, you can throw that in with some butter and some sea salt, and there you go. That's your mashed cauliflower. Throw that on the plate, get yourself a slice of your meatloaf, throw that on your plate. The entire rest of your plate is filled with your salad, and that is a very good visual representation of a paleo meal for you. Majority of it is vegetables. We've got our meat, we've got our liver in the meatloaf, and if you haven't added too much to it, then you won't really taste the flavors of that liver in there. And I've got a recipe for that meatloaf that I just described. It's on paleoporn.net. Salads galore, there's recipes for that on the site as well too. But that's just an example meal of what it looks like for us, and hopefully for you guys too.
And don't let the liver scare you away. I mean, this is like best case. If you can be having liver once a week would be amazing. It's not like we're having liver every meal. It's just we're looking at that nutrient density and really trying to get the most out of what we're eating to really sort of feel the best. But so we kind of alluded to it so far, but essentially, what do we avoid? What do we not have on paleo? So we don't typically have grains. We don't have gluten, which tends to just, I mentioned before, but everyone has sort of this sliding scale of how much they're affected by gluten. Once you remove it, just like with everything else, we remove gluten, we remove soy, generally beans. We won't, at least to start, it's a good idea to remove dairy. And you remove all of these things, and the seed oils, like I mentioned, but you remove all of them and give it a good 21 days, 30 days. Then you can go reintroduce, get a nice sourdough bread, get a pizza, get whatever it is that you would normally be having. And after it's been gone, now you actually have this new marker, like this new level of, okay, this is how I feel when I don't have this. Now, what is that actually doing to me? Like, how is that affecting my performance, how I'm feeling on a day-to-day basis?
Do I notice a difference? You know, I mean, and you don't have to necessarily get rid of all of those things all at once. Like I said, when we started paleo, we took one thing out at a time. So initially we took out bread completely, we took out all grains, and that was the very first thing we just completely got rid of. And like I said, we kept dairy, we kept cheese, we kept butter. We've always kept butter, so we don't have any adverse reactions to butter, so we've always kept that in our diet. But yeah, just focusing on one thing, keeping track, and making sure that you're going a full 21 to 30 days without that thing. If you slip up, start over, because just that one slip up is going to make a change. It's still going to be in your system. So
those are kind of the main things that we just tend to avoid on paleo. Also, eating real food, your sugar consumption will drop dramatically. So this is sort of one of the key parts of one of the key benefits of it. Sugar is a chronic dose-dependent liver toxin. So dose-dependent meaning how much you have. If you have a lot of it, it becomes a toxin. If you have a comfortable amount, it's perfectly safe. Your liver processes sugar. When it gets overloaded, when it's full, it can't process anymore, your pancreas produces insulin. This is why type 1 diabetics need to inject insulin, because their pancreas isn't producing it for them. What happens is insulin is a fat storage hormone. So what it's doing is it's essentially trying to clear out the sugar out of your system, out of your blood glucose. And what that does then is it takes the sugar and stores it as fat. It's what it's supposed to do. It's storing it as energy for later. But this is also why we've taken saturated fat out of the diet. Everything is low fat and kind of low calorie and everything. But the problem is you take fat out of something and it tastes awful. So you need to replace it with something. The fat we're kind of geared to want fat because it's very good for us, and everything that we need is coming from there. So once it's not tasting good, what do you put in? You put in sugar. So this is sort of the trajectory of the last several decades, has been pulling fat out, replacing it with sugar, and then having all of the adverse effects of too much sugar in the diet.
So if you haven't seen it, I'd highly recommend a documentary called Fed Up. And it talks all about sugar and goes into way more depth than we could talk about here right now. And yeah, I highly recommend you check that out. But one of my favorite quotes from that movie is, you can eat a bowl of cornflakes with no added sugar, or you can eat a bowl of sugar with no added cornflakes, and they are metabolically the same thing. So if you think about that, cornflakes, a bowl of that, your body treats that as sugar, processes it the same way as if you had just poured yourself just a bowl full of sugar. And I think that that's a really good visual to understand what's happening in your body. So personally, for me, diabetes runs in my family. My aunt in 2005 died from basically an OD on sugar. She was 57 years old when it happened. And my dad has diabetes, and that was his sister who died, and then his other sister also has diabetes. So personally, I track my glucose levels. Just to tell you where that is, the normal levels when you test your blood glucose, a normal level ranges from 80 to 90 range. And so I'm in a normal range, being following the paleo diet that we have, because we don't have any refined sugars, and what little sugars we do have, I then am able to track. Every morning I test my blood sugar to see where I'm at, and to see how the foods I had the day before have affected me, and whether it's raised up or not. I do that for consistency. So I do it on a fasted state, and I make sure that it's constantly the same so I can compare that data. And that's just me. But my dad recently was brought into the hospital, and he was having some trouble, and they tested his glucose levels, and they were at 247. Remember, I said normal range was between 80 and 90. So this was bad. My mom and dad on the way to the ER were thinking, well, this is it. He's going to die. And so when he came back from the hospital, they had fed him some fluids, and they got his levels back down. They let him go. He went home. And so I went over there, and I was talking to him, and I was like, you know, this can be fixed. You are a type 2 diabetic. That means that it's based on your lifestyle and your diet. It can be adjusted. And so we discussed that. And remember, earlier I talked about how my mom had been tracking. My dad didn't want anything to do with that, and he wanted to keep doing what he was doing. But he saw then what happened with that, and so he was ready to make a change. So what we decided to do with him, since he didn't want to write things down, was he was going to text me. So every day he tracks his glucose levels, and he does it more than once a day. And every time he tracks, he sends me his levels. He tells me exactly what he's eating, when he's eating it, and he just sends it to me in a text, and he doesn't have to worry about, well, where'd that notebook go that I was supposed to write this down in, or anything like that. He's got his phone on him all the time. So he just simply picks it up, tells me what he ate, and he puts it back down. And within a week, his blood sugar was down to 157, which is great. Even though it's really high, it's really great because he was hovering around the 200s for a long time. And so he was making changes. He was not doing the same thing my mom was doing, where she was just going with what she was doing initially and then slightly making changes. My dad had to make changes now, otherwise things were going to get even worse. So, he started eating real food. That's the change he made. And he started eating food regularly instead of going long periods of time fasting, which wasn't working for him. Some people that works with, we only eat 2 meals a day. But for him, it wasn't cool. It wasn't working with his body. So within 2 weeks of making these changes and just being recording and paying attention, after each text, he would tell me, how he was feeling. So as we saw the levels going down, he was able to then recognize, oh, well, I had a candy bar yesterday, and the next morning my levels were really high. And so he was able to correlate what was happening, especially since he was tracking so often. So within 2 weeks, he dropped 15 pounds, and his blood sugar was hovering back in that normal range, about around the 90s. And another week later, consistency, continuing to do the same thing. He was still tracking, still texting me, and he was down another 5 pounds. So just eating those real foods, watching what he was doing, paying attention rather than just going mindlessly day to day and maybe forgetting to eat or choosing not to eat anything because you don't know what to eat. And he was seeing change. So it was a positive change, and he's continuing to do that. And so I'm really proud of both my parents for taking, initiative on, even though it was after something happened, they still decided to, hey, make a change.
And the beauty with his is when he left the hospital, they told him that he would probably have to be injecting insulin, that they weren't certain that his pancreas could produce insulin properly anymore because he had gone so far past that threshold. But thankfully, just through changing diet, he was able to still, everything is still working as it should, which is awesome.
So this texting with my dad back and forth, just to track, have an easy track, that's a service that we're kind of interested in possibly making available. So you guys are the first to know that we're possibly planning on doing this. And if you're interested at all in having an accountability partner via text, definitely talk to us after, and we'd love to get to know more about you and help you if you would like that. So, takeaways?
Yeah, you can go on.
So, our goal for this whole thing, cook your next meal, eat real food, eat like our parents' parents, and let's get off the couch and, walk a little bit.
Yeah, and just keep asking why also. Oh, yes, question.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that I struggle with. How do you get vegetables into your breakfast? Because I don't eat eggs.
Okay.
Because that's something that I find unless I just eat the yolk, I'm it's bad.
Salad.
Do you eat eggs? Do you eat salad for breakfast?
Breakfast salad. Yes, absolutely.
Soup? What do you do?
Yeah, for us, we typically, are you familiar with bulletproof coffee?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every day.
Okay, so typically we would have bulletproof coffee. So we don't really eat 3 meals. We eat 2. So we'll have bulletproof coffee, and then we'll have lunch, and we'll have dinner. But before,
Thyroid problems, so I can't do that.
which is perfectly fine. And what we were doing prior to bulletproof coffee was breakfast salads. And I would do a full salad, and I would actually put eggs on top, which if you're not cool with that.
I like
Yeah. Yeah, so exactly. So I would make 2 eggs over easy and put them on top, and then when you crack the egg yolks, they spin into your salad, and then you got an ooey gooey yumminess. Yeah.
Yeah, you can also just your leftovers from the night before. I mean, whatever you had made, if you're doing a breakfast salad, I mean, throw in whether if it was steak, if it was just anything, part of a pork chop that you had left over. It's really, that's one of the things is it's just the first meal in the day. We kind of have that notion that like breakfast has to be like maybe cereal, eggs, and all these things, but really there's no reason why it can't just be this really nutrient-dense meal. And generally, we just advise avoiding sugar in the morning. I mean, start with some healthy fat, some protein, and yeah.
Really, the possibilities are endless for what you can eat. It's just you have this thing stuck in your head that, well, no, breakfast has to be, well, just get rid of that, you know?
And that's another one of those, that's just sort of ask why. Like, why does breakfast have to be this? That's sort of the big takeaway, too, is just, yeah, keep asking why.
Yeah.
Yes?
I had a question for probably Farmer Wayne. I've always seen that getting eggs that are more orangey or deeper in color are better for you. I wanted your perspective on that. Because a lot of times those are advertised as free range. And that's kind of what I was looking for. What's the best uptake with it?
The color is not important. They will have a deeper color sometimes if they're out on the pasture, but what you really need to look for is that they're pasture raised, because that means they're eating meat, and that's where they're getting, that's where their omega-3s are coming from. Actually having to walk out there and peck and scratch is what helps those eggs. The deeper color will come from that as well normally, but it's not the color necessarily. I mean, in the middle of the winter, our eggs are a lighter color. It's just depends on what's in their system.
Did you have a question? Yeah, so bulletproof coffee is what it's called, and what it is it's kind of, well, you put a cup of coffee, fresh. We usually have a local roast like Intelligentsia beans, and we will do our own at home, but you can do whatever coffee you've got. Add a tablespoon or 2 of unsalted grass-fed butter, and then add 1 to 2 tablespoons of what's called MCT oil. So that's medium chain triglycerides. And that's a coconut oil that's more refined, so it doesn't have the flavor of coconut at all. And so the reason why, and then you'll blend that together. So we use with a milk frother. You'll see people online who will throw it in the blender, and it'll get all frothy, like you're having yeah, like a cappuccino or something like that. And so, or frappuccino, sorry. So that drink, that's starting our day off with fat. And that's what you want to do. You want to start out with fat, so instead, as opposed to sugar, so that you don't get that crash. We don't get that 2 o'clock crash in the middle of the day.
Which,
yeah.
yeah.
I do need a little bit of the sugar in the morning, I find, but then I put the gelatin in there, the gelatin, the fat, and the sugar kind of like balances all out. That way I don't like crash in the sugar because I have fat and protein.
Yep. And I do collagen, so I understand. But there's so many varieties of that. Like I'll add cinnamon. I did nutmeg the other day. It tastes like Christmas.
But yeah, that's a little more kind of in the biohacking side of paleo. It's a little further than just sort of typical paleo. Bulletproof is like Dave Asprey is a Bulletproof exec, and he does kind of biohacking stuff. So if you go places too, there's a few places in the city, and they might sell it as butter coffee, just because Bulletproof is kind of his term. But yeah, you can find it in a few places. We actually have a post. If you just Google Bulletproof Coffee in Chicago, we have a post with kind of, I think, 5 different options.
Do they use butter or ghee?
Typically butter, but I actually haven't tried it with ghee.
But I know people make it who can't have butter. But I mean, ghee is another form of fat where it takes out the solids, the milk solids. So people who can't have dairy will go with ghee. So yeah, I've heard of people doing it, but we've never done it. Did you have a question? Well, typically we're not that hungry in the morning, so I know sometimes people will wake up and they'll be ravenous. You know, they want like a whole bunch of food. We don't really typically wake up with that. So coffee is, well, Bulletproof coffee will give us a meal, but it's not really heavy.
Yeah, and you're not breaking the fast in the same way. You can call it kind of a fat fast, like you're still, breakfast is essentially just breaking your fast. So you have this intermittent fast every time you sleep. Maybe you eat at 5 p.m. and you're fasting till 8 a.m. I mean, that's that's a fast right there. And we're upping the nutrient density, really eating rich whole foods. So we tend to be full longer, we're satisfied longer. And that just sort of tends to be part of the shift. It's in terms of like weight loss and performance and different things like performance in the gym and whatnot, there's some real concrete reasons why you'd want to fast and intermittent fast and have these little windows. But just to really get the overall benefits, if we're just avoiding sugar in the morning, that's kind of a big jump step forward. It can. I mean, we don't actively pursue intermittent fasting ourselves. Yeah, it just sort of worked out that way. But sorry, but what was the question though? If okay, yeah, and it's not universal either. I mean, since I did this, I've actually been avoiding caffeine more, just because I want this to heal better or heal. I don't want to thwart the healing at all, and caffeine can actually have kind of an adverse effect on bone healing. But
he's been having a lot. I've been making constant bone broth, and so that's one thing that he's upped his intake of with this little thing.
Yeah, and bone broth is essentially just a slow cooker with, I mean, the bones from maybe your meal the night before, or specifically getting stew meat and bones. You just cook it for a long time till the bones are all broken down, and you're getting you're getting the collagen, you're getting all the nutrients out of the bones there. So yeah, if there's no other questions right now, yeah, we can always answer a bunch later, but we will. Yeah, we will turn it over to Spencer. Awesome.
Cool. So we'll introduce Spencer.
So Spencer will be. Oh, one more thing. We have a cookbook. It is this one, Pigskin Paleo. But just as a thank you for everyone coming out, if you go to paleoporn.net/HH, so this is Health by Habits, so paleoporn.net/HH, and sign up for our newsletter, we'll send you a free copy tomorrow. So.
But that link is just for you guys.
Yeah, so it's just the people here, and then it's going to be taken down, so you'd want to do it. If you want it, just jump on there tonight or while you're here, and yeah, we'll shoot that your way tomorrow. Yeah. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
All right, I'm all mic'd up. It's my first time on a mic. So I actually planned a lot of this, and I instantly regretted that I chose to follow them. That's a tough act to follow. They're just full of information. So thank you again, and thank you, Farmer Trogg. That was an awesome presentation. So my name is Spencer Harstead. I'm a functional diagnostic nutritionist. So what I do with my clients is I run functional lab tests, and I use those results to find out the underlying cause of disease and disorder in everyone. And I use those results to come up with a lifestyle-based plan of action, which will include things like sleep, exercise, diet, stress management, and supplementation. So I've been doing this whole paleo thing for over 5 years now. I actually did it throughout college, which kind of made me think that if I was able to do it at college when I was at my lowest income point, my highest stress point, I had the least free time of basically my whole life, I really do feel like it's a pretty accessible diet for the general population. Otherwise, I would not recommend it to my clients. I really like that Farmer Trogg brought up the food journaling and the varying opinions on food journaling. That really transitions well into my topic because I'm going to be talking about individualization on the paleo diet. That's something that's so important. And when I'm working with clients, it's not just a standard set of paleo guidelines that I'm giving them. It's a very specific diet for each person. It's a very specific set of supplementation for each person. This is a great template. The paleo diet is a great template, but it's just that. It's a template, and it has to be adjusted for each person. So if you look at a paleo diet, like my diet, for instance, you can look at if I were to do a food journal, which I don't. You could look at my food journal. It's going to look so much different from Jeff and Marla's food journal. Even though we're following the paleo diet, it's going to look so much different. It's going to look very much different from Lynette's, in fact. So I'm going to talk about a few things that can be individualized on a paleo diet. Can everyone hear me all the way in the back? So I'm going to talk about 3 things that can be individualized on the paleo diet. The first will be macronutrient ratios. The second, I'm going to be talking about the specific foods you eat. And lastly, I'm going to briefly touch on supplementation. So in terms of macronutrients, I'm talking about fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Those are the 3 macronutrients that make up basically the energy sources in our diets. There's not much variation from person to person in terms of protein needs. That needs to be about 20 to 25% of your caloric intake is protein. A little bit more if you are looking to build muscle. If you're lifting heavy things, 3 to 5 days a week, you're going to need a bit more protein than the average person. Where there's a lot more variation would be between carbohydrates and fat. So I think there is a bit of a stigma with the paleo diet that it's a low carbohydrate diet. And to me, when I'm prescribing a paleo diet, I think of it as a moderate carb diet. If we look at just different populations, carbohydrate intake in healthy populations, even like traditional, tribal diets that are eating similar to the way our ancestors ate, there's a huge variation in carbohydrate intake. So we can take the Kitavans. They're a group of islanders whose carbohydrate intake is up to 70%. And they're very, very healthy people. Then we can go to the Inuits. They live in Alaska and a lot of other places throughout the world. And their carbohydrate intake up until recently was below 5%. And again, they're a very healthy group of people. They're not on the Western diets. They are really in touch with this stuff. And then we can think about it between an athletic person who works out 5 days a week versus a relatively sedentary person. The carbohydrate intake there is going to vary a lot. So for somebody who's working out hard, doing a lot of sprints and heavy lifting, they're going to want to have their carbohydrates to up to about 45 to 55% of their diet. For somebody with a metabolic disorder, such as diabetes or obesity, they will want to start off on a much lower carbohydrate intake. So somewhere closer to 25-30% carbohydrates. And with that change comes a big increase in their fat intake, because remember, those are the 2 macronutrients that we're going to be balancing, the fat and the carbohydrates. So for somebody in that situation, their fat intake could be up to 60% of their calories, which sounds really crazy to a lot of people who have heard low-fat diets all their lives, something that I even followed at one point. But really, fats are the most calorically dense foods, and it really does not take a lot to get up your fat intake. So for comparison's sake, a gram of fat has 9 calories per gram versus a gram of carbohydrates or protein, which only has 4. So you're getting more than double the amount of calories of fat with each gram of fat than you would if you were eating carbohydrates or protein. Does that make sense? So for me, the Bulletproof coffee, one of the reasons that I drink that is to get more fat into my diet. It's a really easy way to get a couple tablespoons of butter, which is going to add quite a bit of fat to my overall daily intake. And so really what I want to stress here is that it's going to take some self-experimentation to figure out where you need to be. I hope that I gave you a couple guidelines of where you might want to start, but it's going to take a lot of self-experimentation of where exactly you need to be. So you're going to want to try, lower carbs, higher fat at first. If you're switching from a standard Western diet, you're going to be increasing your fat intake a lot switching to this, regardless. And you're going to be lowering your carb intake. The standard Western diet is a high carb diet. This is a moderate carb diet. Does that make sense? So some ways to track this is, this comes back to journaling as well. You're going to track what you eat, and then you're going to track how you feel when you wake up, how much energy you have, how well you slept. Do you have crashes throughout the day in terms of energy? You're going to track your mood. This is both throughout the day and after each specific meal. How do you feel? Are you in a good mood? Are you kind of feeling down or sluggish or whatever it might be? And as Marla was talking about, you can also track your blood glucose. That's really the direct way to get the answer of how your body's handling this certain carbohydrate load. I do want to stress that while you're doing this, carbohydrates are not a snack food. So what I mean by that is that they should not be eaten in isolation without protein and fat and fiber. That's how you spike your blood glucose. That's how you get the insulin resistance, is if you're not eating them with a balanced meal. So you always want to balance those out with some fat and some fiber and some protein and have it in that meal setting. One thing I didn't mention was something that's very important for older people. As you age, your carbohydrate intake should lower. This relates to brain health. Alzheimer's disease is something that's really been growing lately, and one thing that they're finding is really effective for it is a low carbohydrate diet. So as you age, I think there should be a natural progression into a lower carbohydrate diet. I'm talking into your 60s, 70s, not middle age or anything like that. So next I want to talk about the specific foods that you eat on a paleo diet. So they mentioned some of the guidelines, which would include no grains, no dairy, no soy, no corn, wheat, anything like that. That stuff, there's not a whole lot of variation from person to person. I haven't met a whole lot of people that do better on gluten or on soy or on pasteurized milk, for instance, than they do without it. That's pretty rare, to be honest with you. But there are some of these paleo foods, some of the meats, the vegetables, the nuts, the seeds, that certain people don't digest as well and that aren't safe for everyone. They were kind of talking about the different types of a paleo diet. There's the primal, which does include some dairy, mostly raw dairy. It includes some potatoes as well, some white potatoes, some sweet potatoes, which I generally do encourage for you to, again, do some self-experimentation with that stuff. And there's also the Perfect Health Diet, which would be my favorite variation of this diet. This is by Paul and Shuqing Jaminet. They have what's called a safe starches. So in the original paleo template, it was kind of considered that all of these high carbohydrate foods were out because of their toxicity and their effect on your blood glucose. Where the Perfect Health Diet comes from is that there are certain high carbohydrate foods that are very low in toxicity and very high in nutrients. So remember, this is a nutrient-dense diet. We're looking to get the most nutrients with the lowest amount of toxins. So some of these safe starches will include like the root vegetables like taro root, sweet potato, white potatoes. It also includes white rice. And so this is one that a lot of people have to experiment with. Where do you stand with white rice? Because white rice differs a lot from any other grain in that once you remove the bran and the hull, all you're left with is a starch. That's all it is. It has hardly any nutrient value, but it also has no real toxins in it, like the way the other grains do. So if you're eating it, again, in that context with a full meal, fat, protein, fiber, it's not going to have as much of an effect as some of these other grains for certain people. I want to give us specific examples for like people with autoimmune conditions. So that'd be Hashimoto's, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, for instance. There's a lot of different variations that they have to make to this diet to make it work. For instance, they should eliminate what are known as nightshade vegetables. This is a certain family of vegetables that are highly inflammatory to people with autoimmune conditions. These would include peppers, tomatoes, white potatoes, and eggplants, and a few other things. There's like paprika, and there's a list if you look that up. They're called nightshade vegetables, but they should be avoided by anyone with an autoimmune condition. Also, they should be peeling their vegetables. These are very hard to digest for some people, especially those with autoimmune disease who already have kind of some messed up digestion going on. So peeling the vegetables, making sure they're not getting a lot of that really tough fiber to digest is really important for these people as well. Last would be to cook more of your vegetables than eat raw with an autoimmune condition. Again, the digestion is kind of in question with all of these conditions, so you're going to want to cook these foods to make them easier to digest. So for you personally, if you don't have an autoimmune disease that you know of, you're going to want to test any foods that you have suspicion about. So if you suspect, every time you eat peppers, for instance, and you feel kind of foggy afterwards, you're kind of tired and sluggish after you eat that, you might want to eliminate peppers for a few weeks and see how you feel, and then reintroduce them and see what happens. That's what's known as an elimination diet. So you're taking those foods out of your diet, you're letting your body recover if there was some sort of problem with that food, and then you're reintroducing it to see what reaction you have. So if you were to do this with gluten or pasteurized dairy, there's a good chance that you'd notice the difference right away. You took it out, straight out of your diet for a few weeks, and you brought it back in, you'd likely have some sort of reaction. Right now, if you're eating a food constantly and that your body's having trouble with, you're not necessarily getting the right signals because your body is so used to it that it's just dampened that signal. At one point, it was telling you, hey, you should stop eating this. This is a problem for me. But then you keep doing it, and your body just kind of gives up on that part of it, on that signaling part. So removing it, again, that's when you're going to see the reaction once you reintroduce it. There are also some lab tests that you can run to figure this out. There's a whole number of gluten and different like soy, corn, dairy sensitivity tests to determine if you have an intolerance to these foods. There's also one that I find really, really valuable in my practice. It's called the mediator release test, or the MRT. This determines which foods have an inflammatory reaction in your body. This is just a specific pathway in your body, but from this test, people find out that, some seemingly harmless foods are having an inflammatory effect on their body that could be getting in their way of healing. So it could be something like apples and chicken that are coming up on this list. It's not necessarily related directly to your digestion, so you can have an issue with gluten or with soy. You could have an intolerance, for instance, but on this test, it might not come up. But you might have something else like carrots, for instance, that come up. Another one would be the Cyrex Labs Multiple Food Immune Reactivity Screen. This tests a huge list of foods that you'll be eating every day, and it measures how your immune system is reacting. So a lot of people have an immune reaction to gluten, and this is actually irreversible. So this is something that's really important to test, is how your immune system is reacting to different foods. Next time, I'm just going to talk about supplementation briefly. It's a really, really tricky subject and a sticky subject, and it should really be handled on an individual basis. But there are a few supplements that I do recommend to most people. Most supplements are at best not necessary, and at worst they can be causing harm to you by giving you an overabundance of something that you don't need or some other kind of toxins in them. So a few that I would recommend for people transitioning to this type of diet. You're going to notice that most of these are actually food-based. That's how I like to keep it. The first would be a fermented cod liver oil. This is going to get you your omega-3s, your DHA, and your EPA, but it's also a really great source for vitamin A and vitamin D, something that's kind of a little bit tougher to get in your diet, these animal sources of vitamin A and vitamin D. Next would be probiotics. This one is really, really tough to kind of get down. You want to try a few different high-quality probiotics and see which one works best for you, because all of us have different stuff going on inside our digestive system. So you really want to figure out which one works best. One that I really like is called Prescript Assist. It's actually a soil-based probiotic. It's safe to keep out at room temperature. You can keep it in your desk at work or whatever and make sure you're taking it every day. It's actually really effective, really broad spectrum of different good bacteria in that one. The next one would be sea vegetables and seafood. This is something that a lot of people coming onto a paleo diet don't eat enough of. You should be having 1 serving of seafood a week, at least half a pound of seafood a week. I'm talking mostly fatty fish, such as tuna, sardines, salmon, for instance. These are where you're going to get your omega-3s, you're going to get selenium and iodine, but also the sea vegetables. You want to make sure that you're eating those because those are a really potent source of iodine, which is something that's just completely lost in our modern food system. These would be the best source for that. Another one would be digestive enzymes. So almost everyone I see has digestive issues, and they're having trouble just digesting anything. So a broad spectrum digestive enzyme, which can help you digest proteins, fats, and sugars, is really good for just about anyone. And depending on if you have H. pylori infection or not, you want to get tested for that. It helps a lot of people to take a digestive enzyme that has hydrochloric acid. So that's basically what your stomach acid is made of. A lot of people have low acid in their stomachs, and it makes it really hard to digest heavy protein foods especially. The last one would be gelatin or collagen, which they were talking about putting in your coffee, which is how I like to get mine actually, but there's a lot of things you can do with it. You can mix it into baked goods. You can make Jell-O out of it. Jell-O's awesome. But it's something that you want to get on a daily basis because it's something that our ancestors ate all the time off the animals. They would make broth out of the bones and the cartilage of the animals and get this really rich gelatinous broth, and that has collagen, which is a protein that's about 80% of the protein in your body is actually collagen. It's really important. It's what makes up your joints, you know, your ears and stuff like that, but it's just a really important thing that you want to make sure you're getting in your diet. I would first recommend bone broth if you can do that, you know, on a daily basis. That's not always easy to do every day, so I do keep a canister of the powdered gelatin, like from a grass-fed cow, and I'll put that in my coffee or whatever, you know, water even sometimes. But if you're thinking about other supplements outside of those that I mentioned, I would insist that you first get some tests done to determine if they're actually necessary or if they're going to be beneficial. So you can test for the level of oxidation that's taking place in your body to determine if you need an antioxidant, for instance. You can test for the function of your adrenals to see if your adrenals are really stressed out and fatigued and you need any kind of support for those. That's a really common one that a lot of people take without really knowing if they need it or not. They just kind of assume, oh, I'm stressed out, so I should take this adrenal support supplement. It may not be necessary. Another one would be to check for your hormone balance to see if you need to take any type of hormone supplementation or anything to balance that out. Usually I would recommend taking a precursor to a hormone. If you're going to go that route, again, I wouldn't do that without first testing yourself and determining what's really going on. Because there's no real way to tell exactly, you know, what levels you're at without testing. So with that, I'd like to bring everyone back up here for some Q&A. Sure.
What gelatin products do you recommend?
What's that brand of gelatin? You probably use the same one.
We
Great
use-
Lakes. That's the one I use.
We
Yeah.
use upgraded collagen.
So they use the upgraded collagen. There's Great Lakes, which is gelatin. And there's another brand.
Vital Proteins.
Vital Proteins.
That's a
yeah.
local company also.
Their stuff
Yeah.
is really good. They have a collagen that you can just mix right into cold water. Or you can buy the gelatin, which you actually have to soak first and then mix it in.
Yeah, Vital Proteins. That's the local company. They're in northwestern suburbs, actually. And Bulletproof Exec has upgraded collagen, which is another one. Yeah.
That's the pricier route. We got a question here.
Yeah, Spencer, so I understand the rice is a grain also, but still white rice would be better than brown rice. yeah?
Absolutely.
The white.
With
because-
white rice, you're taking off the bran in the hull, you're taking off the bran in the hull, which has all the anti-nutrients and toxins in it. That's what
Phytic
has,
acid, yeah,
yes, phytic acid would be one of those anti-nutrients we're talking about, but it's also you're removing the proteins, the grain proteins, which are very big and very hard to digest for just about everyone.
And just generally, in terms of anti-nutrients, think about the fact this plant needs to survive. So an anti-nutrient is essentially what has let that plant survive for millennia. I mean, it needs some sort of defense system. So it's just that outer shell that an animal won't eat this because they don't digest it properly, and we are just another animal. So that's sort of where this whole anti-nutrient concept comes from. Mm-hmm.
So if one were to get tested or want to get tested, what type of practitioner would they look for? Where would they go to get tested?
I might be a little biased. I actually run these tests, all the ones that I mentioned today. Yes. A functional diagnostic nutritionist. We have a very unique system of how we look at the lab results, and we have, instead of comparing them to the norm of what most people are having, because that's not really a way to look at health. Like, if this is the norm on a test result and you think about 2/3 of the country is obese, for instance, that's not really a good marker of health. So we look at it, we've run thousands upon thousands of these tests, and we have the data to see what matches up with what health, and we correlate it with your symptoms and what you're feeling and all of your history and everything like that.
So this kind of relates to your So I have hypothyroidism. That's one of the things you're talking about, that you compare it to the norm. But it really shouldn't be.
That's right.
So say my test comes back and it's in the normal range and a normal doctor would prescribe it. Do you have somebody at your practice who would be able to prescribe a proper dosage for me?
I can't prescribe a medication.
But do you know doctors who are?
We do have doctors in our network. The process for you would actually have to see that doctor, so it's not really a direct link there.
I can talk to you about it later.
Sure.
If you think about it, like doctors who are good with thyroid, because that's the problem.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand.
I could also recommend my chiropractor to you. We can talk later. I think she'd be great to see for that.
Yeah.
Do you work directly with a doctor, or do you look at, I have autoimmune issues as well. So do you look at the lab tests from my GI doctor? I have ulcerative colitis and celiac disease. So do you look at the labs from the doctor versus what I'm currently eating and the labs I eat from? I don't understand the process of, I don't know what your profession is. I've never heard of your profession before, so I don't really understand the process of what you do other than run these tests.
Completely understood. Ideally, I would like to see any lab work that you've had in the past, because I do know how to interpret a lot of that. But what I mostly focus on are these functional lab assessments, which are really getting down to the root of your issues. So I test adrenals, I test hormone imbalances, I test your gut function, your liver function, different things like that. So I'm not diagnosing you with a disease. I'm saying this is what's causing a lot of your issues, and this is what we're going to address directly. Does that make sense?
All right.
Anything else?
There's no more questions, then
Thank you
that's
all
it.
for coming
Yeah,
out.
thank you.